Hello, and welcome to How I Did It, the video series where I sit down from a microphone and I just spout stuff, and sometimes it makes sense and sometimes it doesn't. I try to fix it in post. Today, on this How I Did It, I'm actually going to go back to one of my old games, which is Hart Connection. And Hart Connection I put out about a year ago. And the reason I've been thinking about it is because the jam that I did Hart Connection 4, the 2018 version, like it just ended, the 2019 version just ended. I've been thinking about coming back to the game and doing its sequel and maybe doing some reworking of it, all that kind of good stuff. So it's been on my mind. So I thought I'd talk about it. And I thought I would specifically start by talking about how I did the story structure, because it's a little bit different than a lot of visual novels. And I hate to phrase it that way, but it's true. And before I begin, just a reminder that if you like these videos, if you like any of the articles I put out, if you just want to support the studio as a whole, I do have a Patreon. $1 a month is all you need to get some cool stuff. And there's other tiers as well. A one-time donation is also really helpful. It keeps the lights on, helps me fund future projects. So, what is Hart Connection and why is it different from other visual novels? Like, why did I make mention of that? So, Hart Connection is a story about 4 mercenaries from the Hart Mercenary Company escorting an elven prince across country. Your mercenaries are Lila, Orchard, Max, and Torok. And your elven prince is Melanthius. Now, as opposed to playing as a single main character and you get to pick who you want to romance, like, oh, I get to play as Melanthius and I get to pick which of the mercenaries I want to romance, you actually pick you pick a main character for yourself. In this case, it's the mercenaries. You get to play as Lila or Max or Orchard or Torok, if I ever actually finish that route, which I wanted to. And you are all romancing Melanthius. So it's a reversal of the typical main character love interest structure. And so the story of the game gets told from 3 different perspectives. And you get a slightly different version of the story and their interactions and how they all feel about each other, depending on who you pick. So I talk about this game in my panel, and this is the slide I show of what the path looks like, of what the flow chart of the game looks like. And it's a little bit, stylized, but it's not too far off. The deal with Hart Connection is I had to tell the same story 3 times. So I had to make the story interesting, and I had to figure out, okay, what's going to be different about each character's perspective at each point in the story. And so I started with figuring out the objective story. What happens from all perspectives, a sort of omniscient view of the story. And that also includes the stuff that even our characters don't know, which is the main mystery of the story. When stuff starts going wrong, I know what happened. Even if the characters don't. And so I began with laying out the main story beats of, okay, here they pick him up. Here's what happens the first day. Here's what happens the first night. Here's what happens the second day. Here's what happens the second night. And deciding, okay, what's the overall plot going to be? Where are they going to hit the snags? Where the snag's going to lead to, what's going to happen after that. And then once I figured out the overall plot structure, I had to figure out then, okay, where are each of the characters physically in space during each of these plot points? While also taking into consideration that for each character, I had to make sure I included a scene where they were alone with Melanthius, the gameplay mechanics, they had to figure out they were alone, at least for one scene, so they could have a conversation. And they had to have this romantic arc checkpoint. Taking all of those things into consideration, I figured out, okay, where are the characters in space during each of the plot points I had mapped out. So, for example, they talk about the actual physical locations of their bodies. When they're off-road and they're having to picnic, they're all doing something different. Lila and Torok are fighting. Orchard's doing something else. Max is doing a Sudoku puzzle. And so the next phase was, again, figuring out where they were all physically in space. That tells me what they perceived the story occurring, what they didn't perceive the story occurring and how they might feel about it. Example, Max is the one who finds the wheel is bent. So Max gets the scene having to deal with a bent wheel in their carriage. The other characters don't get that because they weren't part of that part of the story. They wouldn't have perceived the wheel being bent. When they're at a bar and something happens, only one of them sees it. And so in their story, you get that information, but in the other stories you don't, which was my way of trying to create replayability, because you get to see different things depending on who's you're playing as. So once I figured out where each person was, what of the story they saw, then it's a matter of interpreting the story through their perception. A fact compounded by the fact that not all the characters speak the same languages. Some of the characters speak Elven, some don't. Some speak another language, some do this, that, and the other thing. So, writing through Max's route was going to be entirely different because he didn't speak Elven and the rest of them do. And so his interpretation of what's happening is going to be very reliant on body cues and figuring out what's going on where, and interpreting people's reactions. There was also the consideration of their interpersonal relationships. Orchard's an elf, but he is the species of elf that has been oppressed by the species of elf or race of elf that Melanthius is. So his reaction to Melanthius is going to be quite different than Lila, who's a human. And so all these things were taken into consideration while trying to plot out the individual perceptions of the story at large. So it's basically the overall breakdown of the writing in Hart Connection. Not particularly complex, but definitely something where you had to sort of shift the way you think about writing and think about how visual novels are constructed, how interactive fiction is constructed. I'm probably going to come back to Hart Connection, talk about a little bit more, because I want to talk more about the use of language in the construction of the narrative and as a gameplay element, but that's a whole different shebang bang. But I hope you enjoyed this weird, long, rambly take about Hart Connection and the writing involved, and enjoyed looking at my nasty flowchart. More Hart Connection stuff in the future, possibly. And if you haven't downloaded the demo for the D stands for Demon, it is out on itch right now. It's got voice acting and all that kind of good stuff. And I really hope to see you again soon.